All right. Hello. What's going on? It's Rich Ryan here. This is the RMR Training Podcast. Today I'm solo. Give me the rock. Clear out. John Morant. Probably Luka's a better example there, but Luka Doncic, I need a little bit more fitness. I need a little bit more fitness from my NBA superstars. I'm sorry. I'm Sixers fan. Joel, not fit. Don't love it. Can't lie. Don't love it. Give me the rock. I'm at the top. Clear out. We're going solo today. So, in today's episode, what we're going to do, I'm going to talk about some of the mistakes that you want to avoid in each of the HYROX stations. We've done similar things to this in the past. Meg Jacoby and I, we went through several of the stations in two parts, talking about things that you should do. Here's things that you should not do. We are coming up on race season. If you're listening in the UK, Europe, Australia, thank you. But also you're kind of in the mix of it. But we're really getting ready here in the US to throw down. We had our launch for Toronto a couple of weeks ago. But now it's time. Now it's time in the actual United States. Next week, if you're listening to this on Monday, this Saturday, we got a throwdown in Chicago. Week after that, Dallas. And then I think 2 weeks after that, Anaheim. So now's a good time to really start to work through what you're thinking about when it comes to your race plan, your race preparation, and also how you're going to execute on race day. So I'm going to talk about a few different things when it comes to the actual nuts and bolts, the technical side of the actual stations, and then some different pieces in terms of strategy and approach. So let's go ahead and start with the ski. And now real quick aside, I know you probably heard the ad read in the beginning for RoxOpt, but I have been diving into this a little bit more with some of the athletes who I've been coaching and for myself. It's a really great tool to figure out how to go about a strategy. Basically, what I did, I went through each one of my stations and kind of in my most previous race, 2 races ago, I should say, in my actual PR, and was able to then kind of cross that with my current training. And I've been able to really kind of dial in a race plan based off of what I had accomplished in the past and also what I think I'm capable of now. And just seeing where I have been and seeing where I've been in all of the races that I've run on every station gives me a realistic approach for what is possible in these races. So in terms of strategy, RoxOpt is a great tool. That's a second plug in like 4 minutes, but truly it is a great tool to kind of go over everything and figure out a really solid race plan. On to the SkiErg. So one of the biggest mistakes that you can make here on the ski is just gunning the pace, right? Gunning the pace on that first run coming into the ski. Now, this is a place where you have some time in terms of things to grab onto to try to improve your time in places. So if time is a thing, there is a bit of pacing too much that can happen in HYROX. I know I'm guilty of that because I just respect the totality of this race probably too much, that when it comes to that first run, I'm pretty cautious. So with this first run, you really want to kind of find that line of what is doable and that is going to help you with maximizing your time out there, but also not kicking it too hard into overdrive so that when you get into that ski, you're just like revved up so much and that you're not just at 4 minutes above 4+ minutes with that first run or whatever it is above what you can hold for the entire race, but you carry that momentum into the ski and you start to go harder than you really should because you feel good into the beginning of the race. So truly the pace here is the issue. That first run, maybe not as much, right? Like that first run, I think there is a little bit of time to grab when it comes to that first run because you should be feeling good. And it's only 4 minutes. Like you're not going to really pop yourself there if you are able to settle yourself back when you get into the actual ski portion. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about pace. So pacing on the ski, some of the things we've been talking about here is how you should approach this, what's doable, and what you think and where you should really go in terms of how to paste this in terms of what it reads on the monitor. So I think that if you know your 2K pace, it's 2K plus about 4 to 7 per 500, so that you can really have a target for where to go. So first, you need to know your 2K. If you don't know your 2K, it doesn't really matter. But say your 2K is you're averaging 150 per 500 for the whole 2,000 meters on that. So I think a good place for you to go is 154 to 157. And that will give you a really solid pace that is aggressive, but that you won't really need to pay for as much. You know, you can hold that pace and some for 2,000 meters. Granted, it's an all out effort, but for half of that duration, that is a safe place to be. Now, some of the better skiers in the sport, I think, are probably no, I don't know. I think that is safe. Like even the athletes who are skiing 139s, 140s in that first one, their ski isn't going to be too much faster than, I mean, if they can hold 135s, I think that's reasonable. So that 139 to 140 makes sense. This is just something that I think is really important for you to kind of dial in and make sure that you know what the pace is going to be, and you can front end load that as well. So coming in and uh, having a spot where you know you want to back things off. So if you come in and you're aggressive, or we'll use this 150 as an example, and like you're 152, you're +2, that might be too hard to hold for the entire duration. You might come out a little bit too exhausted. So having a spot there where it's like at 300 meters, I'm going to pull back. And that's where you start to pull back so that the average is out. And at the end of it, at that 154 to 157, but starting up front, just so you can give yourself time to really kind of settle in. A mistake that can happen here as well is thinking this is your day. You come in, I'm ready. I got this. This feels fine. I'm going to keep this rolling. If you don't tell yourself to pull back, and this happens a lot in road races as well, right? If it's a marathon, it's a half marathon, like, you know what? Today's the day. It's race day. I'm going to send it a little bit more than what I typically would, or I'm going to go beyond where my actual goal pace would be because it's race day and I feel like I can. And that is when things really can kind of come back and blow up on you. The idea of banking time, I don't really think exists in most things, in most endurance endeavors, even in something like a 5K. If you go out too hard, you're like, "Oh, just trying to get ahead of it, it usually comes back." And I've ever heard the adage in for a marathon is every second that you go out faster in that first mile than your goal pace comes back in minutes at the end. And there might be something like that here with HYROX with this ski. I don't know exactly what it is, but whatever you think you're gaining in this first piece on the SkiErg because you're feeling good and you feel like you're into it, it's going to come back. And the margin in which your best versus your worst ski effort could be isn't very much. It's like 10 seconds. Just truly. Like if you hammer the thing versus something that's sustainable, you gain 10 seconds and that could all come back on that next run, truly. And if not, it will come back on sled pull. It will come back on burpee broad jumps. That's where you will end up losing it. So even though you feel good now, in 20 minutes, you're not going to feel as good. So being really cautious here is a smart strategy. And I think it's a mistake unless you know that you can hold something aggressive at like 2K pace or faster, and you know it's something you can do. You've tested it and you practiced it, and you're just like good at the ski or can recover well off of it, or you have just like excellent form and it just the efficiency is there, then go for it. But I think it's a mistake. Another mistake I see in terms of actual form here on the SkiErg is just not enough power through your hips and your upper body, through your torso, I should say, and using too much of your upper body extremities, like your arms, not like your arms, so that you don't, so that you're just not generating that much power and you're using your arms way too much. If you come off of the SkiErg and you're feeling kind of blown up in your arms, like a lot of the blood is like it has shifted into your upper body, into your biceps, triceps, your forearms, into like your chest even. And as you start that run, you can kind of feel it being like swollen, heavy, kind of when you come out of that. you're probably pulling too much with your arms, and it's pulling, again, the blood away from your away from your other body parts into your upper body. So when you get back onto that run, things need to kind of shift back into your legs. So being efficient here is very important. So driving hard through your upper body, keeping your elbows tucked in tight, and dropping your hips down. One thing that can happen, and I'm certainly have been guilty of this, is something that I'm working on now, is flaring those elbows out a little bit too much. Like as those elbows flare and come away, and you get a little bit wider in your position, you start to need to use your chest in that pulling down, that depression. And really, what your chest should be doing is pushing out. But as it's pulling down, that's what your lats should be doing. So as your elbows get out, you start to use your chest more, really when you should have your elbows in tight. So you'd be using more of your lats, staying connected with that machine, with the biggest muscles in your upper body, not in your chest, but your lats. So being able to drive yourself down and staying connected that way is going to make you more efficient, is going to cause less damage, and is just going to be faster. So keeping those elbows tucked in really tight. That's a mistake that I see people make all the time. And again, I am very guilty of that as well. Having my elbows flare out a little bit too much, using too much chest, using too much arms. So really that's something to keep an eye on in your actual training, to make sure that when you get there on race day, you do not make this mistake. And with form, that's not something I would recommend going into the race and being like, I know that my form might not be great now, but during the race, I'm going to keep my form better. That's just not going to happen. You're just going to go back to your previous movement patterns. The muscle memory is real, and you won't be able to overcome that if you have not been practicing consistently. So if you haven't started, start right now. Keeping those elbows in tight, throwing your chest down, dropping your butt, and just being efficient through the actual ski. Something else I see in terms of making a mistake on the SkiErg is the cadence in which people are attacking the SkiErg. This is going to depend on, again, your size is definitely something that is going to be that is going to determine how fast you need to go in terms of your work rate, your strokes per minute. But too often I see people really trying to out engine the SkiErg and not using the power that they do have. Instead, they just try to go real fast and pull and just turn over the strokes per minute really quickly. And that can work for a very short duration, but eventually you are going to need to be powerful when you are driving through this machine. I would recommend not going above 45 strokes per minute generally, and that's even pretty high. I say that for the athletes who might be a little bit shorter, who might have a little bit less range of motion, so they're naturally going to be moving faster on this thing. But I would say that 40 is honestly a good spot. 40 to 42, I think it's fast enough. And if you start to go any faster than that, you will not be getting the power that you need to have on this machine. Along the same lines, if you have spent basically any time on the SkiErg, you understand that the higher the damper, it doesn't always mean the faster that you're going to go. It just means that you're going to create more resistance on the fan. And yes, if you are bigger and more powerful, it will go faster. But if not, it's just harder. So don't put the damper up and thinking that that's what's going to make you go faster. It's just going to be harder. And really, if you're more efficient at a lower damper, then that's where you should spend your time. So really those are the main mistakes that I see on the SkiErg, things that you need to avoid on race day. Also, I don't really think you need to stand there with your hand up. If you're like waiting for I think it says that in the book that you finish your 1,000, you raise your hand for a judge to come over. I don't know. I guess it's a safe way to do it, but just make sure you get to 1,000 and you should be fine. And I don't believe I've ever sat there and waited all the way until a judge came over and released me. I wouldn't say that's a mistake. I'm just saying that's something that you should, just consider if you're a rule follower, which shout outs to you. On to the sled push. So that run after the ski, this is similar to that pacing that I was talking about going into that ski itself. That first run, I think, again, can be aggressive. as long as you pull things back almost immediately in the ski. If you don't, you'll probably come out of that ski also feeling aggressive. And then we're looking at, 4, 8, 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes of hard effort in this 60 to 90-minute race. And that is just too soon to be going hard. So after the skier, you also really need to kind of check your pace because you still will be feeling pretty good. It's less than 10 minutes in. So you still have that juice. You have not spent it all. But again, if you have that mindset like, hey, this is my day, I'm going for it. It's too early for that. You need to have that mindset after burpee broad jumps and be like, now is the time. I'm going for it, right? Like you don't win, you don't PR a half marathon in that first 5K because you feel good. You just don't. If you've been there, you know what I'm saying. So this second run it can be fast. It doesn't need to be slow, right? But it should be smooth. It should be comfortable. It should be something that you can hold for the duration. And most likely it will be fast because your energy is just more available. You have not really inflicted any damage onto your lower body. So like you're just going to be running better than what you will be running later in the race. But this is not a place to bank time. This is not a place to get ahead on time. So I would be fairly smooth, and also just telling yourself like, not yet, not time to race. Execute the plan, not time to race. When you get into that sled push, the main thing in terms of your form, I mean, I just like to see people use that hooks method where your palm of your hands and your forearms are placed against the pipes on the poles on the sled. I just think that's better. It moves your hips closer to the weight, moves your feet closer to the weight. The grip on the carpet's a real issue. It can be a real issue if you don't have good footwear. So making sure that you understand how to do this method and how it kind of feels. Another thing that it really does is open up your breathing pathways. You are way less restricted in your upper body than say what if you had the poles up next to your shoulders and your hands on the poles next to your shoulders. That is can potentially be faster. It's probably a more powerful position. Not probably, it is more a powerful position. But if you were pushing it for 12 meters for time, or you were just trying to be as powerful as possible for a short duration, that's the best way to push it is with your hands on the poles and probably your back flat to the ground, kind of parallel to the ground, and just driving really hard through your legs. The problem is that it's not 12 meters, it's that it's 50. So you need to be efficient and be able to breathe well and be able to continuously have the blood flowing through your entire body uninhibited. Like if you're driving really hard in your upper body and driving hard through your lower body, it's just going to cause a lot of bracing throughout, which will restrict blood flow because basically you're flexing your muscles really hard, right? That's blood flow restriction. And when that all starts, when you like release and it kind of rushes out of that, it can be a little bit dizzying. It can cause a lot of respiratory elevation. So making sure that you are being as loose as possible while moving the sled the best that you can. That's a big mistake. It's hard for me to say that that's a mistake, but that's something that I would highly recommend that you do is not hold those poles in your hands up by your shoulders. It will be hard. It will be hard to come out of that thing moving at a good, strong, solid pace. Same kind of thing here with the pacing, right? I think it's appropriate to pause on every length. Ideally, it's one pause. I think that that is a good place and a good thing to aim for, whether that's you're going 3/4 of the way or half the way down and making a quick pause. I think that it makes sense to have that. The sled push is a place where there is a big variance between your best effort and your worst effort. So there's time here, right? If you are paced appropriately through the ski, like where there's not that much variance, and you get to sled push, there's time. There's time for you to make up a lot of ground on this one station. It could be 90 seconds, truly. but you can't do that all on the first length, right? And if you put too much out on the first length and a half, the first 2 lengths, it's probably going to catch up to you, if not on the last 2 lengths, but on that next run. So having a spot where you know that you can rest and continue to work well, whether that is something that you're counting off in your brain, like your steps, or if it's a marker on the carpet itself, like 3/4 ish, or if it's intuitive, if you're like, I can go until my legs feel just before they're going to start to kind of fill up too much. Whatever it is, I would have a plan for that. And I would also have a plan for the rest. That's a huge mistake I see, is not having a plan for the rest. So you can push it and then you stop and you rest for who knows, for however long that you want to. That could be 5. You might say in your brain, like, I'm going to do 5 seconds. And what feels like 5 is actually 15 in that moment, because you're like, I need a little bit more. I want to do I want a little bit more of a break. And that's where the time can really start to spiral. So making sure that you are resting in intervals that are controlled. Once that starts getting out of control is where you start to lose a ton of time. Huge mistake to absolutely avoid. Have a plan for your rest and execute that. If 5 isn't enough, 5 seconds isn't enough, make it 10. It's better than starting too soon or not rest, or bleeding it to 20. Make it something that is doable and do the math, right? Be like, all right, if it takes me 30 seconds to push it with a break in the middle, then 10 seconds, that's 40 per 40 per length. Down the other way is 120, 2 down, another 30 back. You're looking at, 230 to 245 or whatever it is, right? So just do the math on it and track it during training so that you know how long it does kind of take. And, we never know what we're going to get on the sleds. So do your best to have the sleds feel like race day or a little bit heavier even during training, and time it out, map it out, understand where you need to start the rest and how long you need to rest. And it should give you a decent idea of what you're capable on this thing, you know? So having a plan and not just being like, I'm just going to crush this sled. That's a good thing. If you make that plan and then you want the outcome is to be crushing the sled, then yeah, do that. But if you don't have a plan, that's a mistake. This is just a one-off. I get asked this sometimes. A lot of people asking is that if, like, what's better, short, choppy steps or longer, more powerful steps? And I don't really know if most of us have that kind of option. I think it's just like however it needs to move, it has to move that way. But maybe if you are bigger, more powerful, and you can move it with a big, long step. The issue with a big, long step, right, is that if you start to lose power throughout that step, then it's just going to slow down before your next stride even starts. And ideally, you want to keep the thing in motion. So if you're big and strong and you can take big steps, that's better. But if you can't take big steps, right, then it's just going to slow down before you get your other step moving, which is going to cause it's going to make it harder with that next step if it's slowing down. The best way to keep that thing moving is to keep it moving at a good, strong pace, right? So once it starts, keep it there. So if that means having less steps, then that's what it means. Then you have to make it shorter and choppier to keep it going. So I think that's the answer. Wherever you can move it the fastest is what you need to do. So I would guess somewhere, most of us are somewhere in the middle there, where it's like as long as you can, but as long as you can make it while being fast still. That's I get. All right. Off of the sled push, onto the run. This run just needs to, I don't know if there's much option here as well. I think if you are still feeling like you can hammer this, you're probably going to have a good day. You're probably going to have a good day. Uh, for me, I like to kind of get composed here, kind of just be like, we're fine. This is working. We're okay. Because now, even if those first 2 runs are measured and the SkiErg's measured, this run might be a little bit less in your control. And especially on that first lap, just knowing that it's going to get better though is important. My first race, My guy Bracken Crocker was out there. He was showing support. I think he was doing doubles. And I remember him specifically saying, like, it's going to get better because I got rocked so hard on that first run because I was pushing it with my hands on my shoulders and just pushing it as hard as I could possibly push with my back almost flat to the ground. And I was coming out of the thing hurting. My guy BK said, "Hey, it's going to get better." It did get better, and it did. And that's just something to remember, that the sled push, if it feels like it rocked you a little bit, like the running well and doing everything you can to kind of recover while moving smooth, while moving quickly, it will get better after a lap and a half maybe. So now we're coming into sled pull. So I've talked about this before, and where I like to have gloves on me, gloves in my pockets, and I will put those gloves on during this run for sled push. But this is something that is just a mistake that you can just easily avoid, is making sure that your grip is sound enough to take on that sled pull, whether that's grabbing chalk, whether that is having chalk in your pockets, whether it's having gloves, whatever you need to do, make sure that you're going to grab that rope and it's going to stay in your hands. If it slides even just the slightest bit, it's going to make it that much more challenging. And you start bracing really hard through like your legs, and like your back can't quite open up because it's sliding through. It just makes it so much harder. I've been there, and that's why I wear gloves now. So I would truly avoid any possibility of this rope sliding out of your hands. If you have not done a HYROX yet, or you have not used the new equipment yet, it's a completely synthetic material, and it's newer, right? I mean, in the US, I don't know, where are we at now? Maybe this is the fifth race that we had. So I'm sure it's breaking in more, and the more it gets broken in, the better I think the grip will become, because it kind of loses a little bit of that like shininess that these new ropes have, like this kind of sheen that's over top of this plastic rope. But it is slick. It's not like those kind of composite wood, or whatever it is, that is a little bit more textured and a little bit easier to move. So whatever you need to do, make sure that you have the ability to pick up that rope and move with that rope. Pulling the rope with the extra slack in between your legs is a monster mistake. A monster mistake. The best way to move the sled is to maximize the amount of time you're moving throughout that box that they allow you to operate in. It's about 6 feet from front to back. So if you can move from the front of the 6-foot box all the way to the back, and at the end give it like a little pull to maybe give it a little bit more, then you should be pretty good. It's going to be hard if you're not utilizing that. And when you have the rope in between your legs, the slack bunches up directly behind you, which inhibits how much you can operate within that box. So instead of like the 6 feet, you walk back 4 feet and you have to stop because you're stepping on a rope and you don't have the grip on the ground, or you just have to pull with your arms, which is just like not recommended. It's not that doable. I've seen it for like open, it's doable, but in pro, I haven't seen anybody who's performing at a high level get there and start pulling out with their arms. It's just like at that point of the race, you're already exhausted. You need to be very steady. You need to make sure you're being as efficient as possible. And pulling with your arms ain't it. That ain't it. Along those lines, when you pull your initial pull, you should not have your arms bent. I see this happen all of the time. And again, a lot of the things and a lot of the philosophy that I have around these stations are how to be as fluid and open as possible and not have that bracing. Talked a lot on the sled push. Like bracing really heavily is not an advantage, especially when you're in the first 20 minutes of a 70-minute race, right? So keeping your arms straight and having it grip through your hands. And so when you start to move, basically your arms are just there to attach to the rope, and you're moving it with your legs and your hips and your torso, not with your arms. Your arms are just like the straps that fix that rope, that fix that sled to your body. And you need to move it with your body, not with your arms. If any of you have done deadlifts, if you haven't, I suggest that you do. You should do deadlifts. They're great, make you very strong, make you feel very strong. If you start bending your arms doing a deadlift, it's like not gonna help you. It's not gonna help you at all. If anything, it's just gonna pull you out of position because maybe you're strong enough that you can lift it with your arms, which would be crazy. But then as soon as you get it up, like your elbows will, the slack will come out of your elbows and it will become straight again and it will pull you out of position. So the same thing can happen with the sled pull, right? Like if those arms are bent to start and like you start to lose it, it's just gonna move your torso forward when you want that momentum going backwards. If you start moving forward because your arms are bent as you start and your arms start to kind of straighten as you go, then your shoulders start moving with your arms. You're going forward. You need to go backwards. You need to move this thing backwards. So if it starts to go forward, like that's just a problem. And that won't happen if your arms are straight. If your arms are straight, like you cannot lose connection with that unless the grip, right? And that's from that first mistake that we talked about. Like if your grip does start to go, then your shoulders might go with it. But as long as your grip is there and your arms are straight, it won't pull you forward once you are moving backwards. It's like it can't. It won't do that. And you need to move backwards with this sled. So keep your arms straight. Do not bend your arms. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to do it. If you are going to bend your arms, bend it at the very back of that box that they give us. If you still have a little bit of oomph, and again, the best way to move a sled is just to keep it in motion, right? And when it's moving, if you got a little bit more, you can pull it, and you can give it like another couple of inches. That will add up, right? But at what cost? If you need to get back there and really explode with your arms, like what is that going to do to you? So that's it. That's it. Another mistake that we can kind of talk about, which is like not necessarily a mistake. It depends on where you're at. But the lowest hanging fruit in terms of the station and how to improve is to hustle during the transitions. Running back and forth in the transitions, you'll just save time. But again, I'm not going to call this a mistake because if your energy is like really depleted and you need it to, and you just like need that breather, then you have to take it. But if you have the option and like you choose to take this option to run the transitions, like it's just, again, it's low hanging fruit. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? Out of the sled pull we go. This is a run that it can go either way, right? If you are kind of teetering on that line of am I pushing too hard, or if you've paced it appropriately, you might be able to even go faster here. But if you hit the sleds hard and you're kind of teetering, if you hit it too fast, like this, it's probably over. Like this run's going to be poor. But if you're like on that line already, which is definitely possible, like 20 some minutes into this race, like this is a place where you now might be right at your red line. And now you just need to maintain that for as long as you can, ideally through the 100 wall balls. Or maybe it pops a little bit, 100 wall balls, but you can finish that thing. But if you're riding that line and you need to just hang there, you might need to be a bit slower on this run because you're at that line. And if you're trying to just maintain that actual time and pace and ignore the effort, then you might pop. But if you've been cautious, you might come out of here feeling all right. So this is a really important run, but at this point, you probably don't have many options of how you want to do it. So that's with that run. And coming into the burpee broad jumps, this is a place where everything can kind of come crashing down. This is our last station that we're going to talk about today. So burpee broad jumps, you just need to make sure that you are managing your effort fairly well. And the best way to do that is to change the style in which you are approaching the burpee broad jumps. I would highly suggest everybody steps forward. It's just a better way to, it's just a more efficient way to move at this point. I mean, maybe not efficient, it's not the word, but energy efficient is the word for that. The amount of jump that you'll gain from jumping forward versus stepping forward is almost nothing. It's almost nothing. And if you're jumping forward, the idea, right, is that you can gain some elastic energy from like your Achilles and like your lower leg muscles. And as that loads, you'll get a little bit of free energy back and it will spring you forward. You won't get that when you step up, but you get a little bit more like forward momentum and as opposed to the elastic energy. But the forward momentum from stepping up and stepping into a jump can and probably does. I've never measured this. I probably should, but it doesn't like if you need to do a standing broad jump like with your feet together versus stepping into it, I would imagine stepping into it's a bit more advantageous, right? I think that you would carry a little bit of momentum, and the jump would be, if not further, probably the same. So that's why I wouldn't jump up. There's not too much of an advantage there, and it's pretty costly. It's pretty costly on that end. So the option then is stepping back or jumping back, and that's up to you. That's however you manage your effort. If you are, I've done this in a race for sure. I have been like, I'm killing these burpees regardless of how I feel, and I did kill them. I came out and I was okay, and then I got in the row and I killed that too, and then I was dead, and then I could barely finish the race. So something that can happen with this race or races in general, right? It's like I have to hold this pace in order to execute the race that I want. But if either you misjudged your fitness, you did not execute the first half of the race or the first three stations of the race, then you need to adjust. You just need to adjust your strategy so that either you can recover or you just like have to go slower if you want to finish this thing. And that third option, which is a mistake, is just like barreling through it and be like, I hope, let's hope I can do this thing that I've never been able to do before. And sometimes that happens in races, but not like dramatically. Not like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm hammering all this, and then I'm getting here, and then I'm just gonna like, I'm doing this in 2:30 no matter what. You just have to adjust. You have to adjust, and the best way to do that is by like changing your form a little bit, going slower on the way back, by stepping back, going slower on the way up, and taking rest in the appropriate spot. Which leads me to my very next mistake that I see happen on burpee broad jumps all the time, all of it. When there's places to rest that make sense in burpee broad jumps, and there's times that don't make sense. The times that don't make sense are when you step up and you rest before your jump. We just talked about how forward momentum is very important, especially when stepping up. So if you step up and then stand all the way straight or stay hunched down, you've like lost that forward momentum and you just need to kind of either regain it or you're just going to jump less far. So if there's places to rest, it would be directly after the jump. You can stay in a hunch position. I would recommend keeping your chin up a little bit just to keep that pathway going so you're not like crunched over and crunching down through your diaphragm and closing your breathing pathway. Keeping your head up a little bit, but crouching down before you head down to the ground for your next burpee. Or you can just rest on the ground. That is fine. That is a fine place to rest, truly. As long as you're just not like laying down there for 10 seconds, then that's a problem. Then that's a problem how like not having a plan for your rest is a problem. So if you're going to lay on the ground, you're just going to like chill there. It's fine for a little bit. It is, but you can't like rest in every single spot for the whole time. If like you hit the ground, you rest, you stand up, you rest, you land, you rest, then you're just going too slow. You're just going too slow. So pick one spot to rest. I recommend right after you land on the jump, taking like crouching down. You're already halfway to the ground. That's why I like the crouching down, is because you've landed in a crouch position, and then you're already kind of close to the ground. If you stand back up, you're gonna have to get back to the ground. I mean, this is nitpicking, but that's what we're talking about. Why are you listening to this if you don't care about the nitpicking? So if you're going to rest in that crouching position, you're closer to the ground, you'll get to the ground quicker. So those are some major mistakes that I see on the burpee broad jumps, is just being wacky with the pacing and not resting in the appropriate place. So rest in the appropriate place and you can come out okay. You can come out okay. Truly. You'll be all right. And then you just got to tough it out. And that's where we're stopping today. I've talked enough. I can't believe it. It's been 40 minutes. Thank you so much for listening to the RMR Training Podcast. If you listened for the first time, thanks a ton. If you listened for the first time and listened all the way to here, that's amazing. And if you are continuously listening, if you're subscribed, thank you. We really appreciate the support that we get from you all and that you do spend your time with us. Thank you. Truly, thank you. I'm saying truly too much. We got races coming up. I'm going to be at Chicago, then Dallas. Ryan Kent will be in Dallas. I will be in Dallas, and then I'm a maybe in Anaheim. I'm a big time maybe. If these first races like Chicago and Dallas go well, I don't think I'm going to go to Anaheim. But it's already, what is it? It's November 8th when I'm recording this in Colorado here, and it's snowing. So Southern California sounds pretty good to me. So maybe I'll go. But definitely Chicago. If you're there, come say hello. We'll be doing men's pro, which apparently is going to be at like 8 p.m. And then I'm also popping on a relay. So I'll be there late. I'll be there in the afternoon as well. So hope to see everybody out there. If you do listen to the show, please say hello. We love that. We love chatting. Again, you support us and love to meet the people who listen to the show. And if you have feedback, make sure it's good feedback. That's all I'm trying to hear. Drink Powerlift, take ESN products, check out RoxOpt. It's awesome. It's awesome. All right, that's it. I'm gone.